Hey friends, I just got a copy of the Quilt Genius Design Toolkit from the folks at C&T Publishing. They asked me to take a look, play around with it, and tell you my thoughts. So I am going to show you what's inside. We're going to do a little drawing, and I will be back at the end with my thoughts and feelings.
All right, let's dive right in. The first thing that you're going to want to take a look at when you open your packet is the instruction kit. I did not go through these very well when I very first started to play around with this tool, so I definitely recommend going through, figuring out how to use the grid, figuring out how to use the rulers, figuring out the on-point and isometric graph paper and how those measurements work, using all of the stencils to make your basic shapes and add borders and rows, and then just going to town using everything to make an amazing quilt design that is all your own. What I really like is that you can order refill graph pads so you don't have to get a whole new kit. Setting those instructions aside, let's take a look at the graph paper. Inside, there's 3 different types of graph paper. There's a regular grid, there's an on-point grid, and there's an isometric grid. All 3 of these are really awesome for designing a whole bunch of different kinds of quilt layouts, and I'm excited to see how that works and if it makes the math easier later on. So the first stencil we're going to look at is for setting up your grid, and it also has some basic shapes for borders. Here you can see it a little bit better, and all of those dots are for laying out however many inches wide by inches tall you want your design to be, and then at the bottom there are shapes for different borders and sashing. We're going to go ahead and put this aside and see what else is in there. Next up, we have 2 stencils for some basic shapes. There's orange peels, square within a square, half rectangles, circles, quarter circles, half square triangles, and quarter square triangles. These are all really cool, and if you're doing basic shapes, you're really going to enjoy using these stencils. Putting them aside, let's pull out the other 2 stencils. This stencil has a ruler at the top, so if you do need to measure out inches, you can do that with this particular stencil along that side. That stencil is also really good for shapes like flying geese, diamonds, half square triangles, really interesting. The bottom stencil is really good for using the isometric designs on that graph paper. All right, now we're going to get out some colored pencils and see what kind of a design we can make. The first thing I'm doing is taking a mechanical pencil and filling in these dots to make a 60 by 60 quilt that I'm separating into 5 by 5 grid of 12-inch quilt blocks. Recommend that you use the mechanical pencil so that that ink will fit into the holes in the grid, and then I just used the side of one of the other stencils to draw my lines. I didn't really do the math here, so I'm not really making this like I wanted to, but I'm using the flying geese shapes to draw in some flying geese. And if you take those diagonal lines that are drawn and line them up into your block, it's going to make sure that you can have them lined up the way that you want to. And then I'm just coming in with some colored pencils and doing some coloring to make a little bit of a green ombre, going through, drawing more flying geese until I filled in the whole quilt top. Now I've decided that I'm going to play around with the border shapes a little bit and see what I can make happen on the edge of this quilt top center. I did learn a little bit from doing the center that I'm better off just going straight in with the colored pencil when I'm doing these shapes, and so that is a lesson learned if you're going to go and do this on your own later. And there we go. I'm pretty happy with this.
Okay, so now that I've had a chance to draw around, let me tell you a little bit about what I'm thinking. For a one-off pattern that's just for me, not one that I design for you as well, I think that this is going to be really cool. That way I can kind of draw things out and have a plan before I sit down to make a quilt that's never going to get made again. For pattern design, normally, since I'm doing that at scale, I start all of that in Adobe Illustrator. So I don't know that I would start a pattern that I'm going to sell with this design toolkit, but it was really fun to play with. I learned a little bit even as I was going on the best way to draw the shapes and put them in. I would probably do a little more math and thinking before I start my next drawing. I'm really excited to try the on point graph paper. I'm really excited to try the isometric graph paper. So maybe I'll put some more videos out later on that, but take a look at the link in the description. That's where you can get your own copy. If you are interested in designing your own quilts so that you can make something that's uniquely you, this is a fun tool to play with. All right, see you later.